It's another episode, gentlemen. Hello,
Yeah.
hello, hello.
Welcome to
The attic.
The attic.
Agency Exposed.
Oh, yeah.
In
yeah,
the
okay.
attic.
Yeah, in the attic.
Remember when we used to have the silver table?
Yeah, I know. The silver table was cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we don't have it. Now we just have a wood table.
It's okay.
Wish we could have stolen that from the last place.
Mm,
It reminds me of Tolkien's silver chair,
yeah.
but silver table.
Hey, guys.
Now we have the attic.
We're all here.
Brad, you don't have coffee.
I don't. I walked up the door with
You
it
don't have
sitting on the
coffee in
table.
a Yeti mug,
No.
a black Yeti mug.
No sleep till brisket.
Yes.
So I don't know what order these will come out, but I missed the last one we recorded. So if you are listening in order, I wasn't on the last one. I guess it went well.
MIA.
Yeah.
Missing in action. He was.
Yeah.
Bob was in action last week, and
I was.
he.
Yeah, he was in action,
Yeah,
just
he-
not here.
Yeah, he did this little thing called TED Talk. I don't know if you guys ever heard of
TEDx.
that.
Come on.
TEDx.
Yeah.
Sorry, not TED Talk. TEDx. Get it
We're,
right.
we're working our way up to TED Talk.
Yeah.
Is that count for? Is that
Sorry,
TED,
it's not. It's the first level of TED Talks.
Yeah.
Is that TED Extreme?
X.
Yeah,
What does
TEDx.
the X stand
It's
for?
extreme. No, TEDx is the local kind of regional versions of TED. So they have in different towns and cities, they'll have TEDx that will represent the vibe and or represent people in the local region. And so I believe we have one in Nashville. Now we have one in Franklin. This was the first one. And I'm not sure where else they are in the great state of Tennessee, but they're throughout the country.
Very cool. So, Bob, you had your talk was about 12 minutes or so.
Yeah, you have 12 minutes to talk, and you have to memorize it. So you don't have like notes, or we didn't have a screen. I understand sometimes they will give you a backup screen teleprompter, but we did not have that, so you don't always have it.
So, what was the title of your talk?
My title was From Ambiguous Loss to Tragic Optimism, Journeying Through Our Collective Loss Together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. So it's before I tell you about it and get into the content, you asked me how it went, because we
Yes.
haven't seen each other since last weekend when it happened. It went good, but I was a little rattled at the beginning because I was the only one that they had audio troubles on.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
So
Now,
I-
you used to play in a band
Yeah.
back in the day, so you're
Back in the
kind of
day.
used to that kind of thing.
Yeah, but leading up to this for weeks on end, you have a certain level of anxiety. 12 minutes to talk is a long time
Yeah.
when you have a speech that you're supposed to give as if it's a talk.
Right.
So there's a lot of memorization and all that practice. And we had a coach. You get a coach, a TEDx speaking coach.
Oh, did
kinda
they?
works with you.
That's cool.
So all of that, and so so there was 3 in the morning, and then 3 in the afternoon, and 3 in the later part of the day. I think there's 9-10 of us that spoke. But so I go out right after lunch. The first 3 had gone in the morning, and things seemed to go really well. It was right here in the downtown Franklin Theater. So I walk out and I start talking, and I know that my microphone's not on, right? Because you know when your microphone's on or not.
Right.
And they had done this like lapel thing. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep talking. No one's saying they don't hear me or anything. So, so the head of it interrupts me. So these things, they announce you, there's a 3-camera shoot, and it's all, produced. So she breaks in and said, hey, the microphone's not on. So she goes back and kind of tells the AV guys, get this right. Please turn on and let's do this again. Let's re-announce him. So we get that fixed. So they re-announce me, and then I go back out and I start it again. So I'm about a minute in again. And I start hearing this like beeping alarm sound going off behind the stage. And
wow.
It's loud enough to where if you're on the stage, you can hear it. But if
Right.
you're down out in the audience, you probably can't. So there's that. And then there's this ringing feedback that starts, how like the microphone's too hot and they don't have the
Right.
monitors worked out. And so I'm continuing on, but then in the back of my head, while I'm talking, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do this for 12 minutes.
Just tons of distraction.
It's
Wow.
like total distraction. So
Yeah.
I stop And
Okay.
I turn to them and I go, the sound is not right. I can't do this. You guys are gonna have to fix this. So I go off again. Make a long story short, third time was a charm.
Did you start from the beginning again?
Yeah,
Because
the third time?
because this is shot for.
Yeah, so there's
shot.
practice. So.
Yeah, so it's practice. And
Even Oprah has probably done this many times where they have to restart the show. And
yeah, it didn't bother me, and actually, I feel like I handled it well and kind of made light of it. And obviously, the crowd was kind, but it was a little distracting. So anyway, that's my TEDx story.
Man, the distractions, especially when it comes to that alarm sound and
that would drive
feedback,
me crazy.
You just can't do that.
I think
It's
it
just so
should be
hard to
called
focus.
TEDx under pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So the next one will be simple.
Well,
That is awesome. I mean,
I like the flexibility, though. I mean, I'm glad that you know.
Yeah, I made jokes about it.
You've got a good story.
And everybody, I think, from what they said was, man, we were on the edge of our seat the first time. And then the second time, so we were really ready to hear how it ended.
Oh, wow.
Where you were going with it.
so before you get into, because I'd like to hear your talk, can we talk about the mechanics of the TEDx or the TED Talk, right? So you got a coach.
Yes.
You got a speaking coach. What was that like?
It was amazing. And she is a woman who has a background in television production. So she was a producer in LA for many years on news talk shows like Geraldo and Sally Jesse Raphael, those type environments. So she's really good with knowing how the production side of it goes. But she also has traveled the world and had been a English speaking and communication coach for business people.
Okay.
So her husband is an executive in the automotive industry, and so they live in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, and they also live on the West Coast as well. But anyway, all of that to say, she was phenomenal. And
how long did she work with you? Like, what were some things you learned?
Yeah, I think a good coach, and we've talked about this before. It's less about like telling you how to do things and more of a support, someone to be there to bounce things off of, and then to guide you along the way. Because in these environments, in creative environments, they're not trying to make you something that you're not. They want to mold you and bring out the best creativity and the best version of you, because a good TED Talk, any speech, any communication has to be real. It has to be like from your own experience. It has to be emotion, has to feel, the crowd has to feel that. So it was her job to say, okay, here's structurally how it needs to be. Now here's grammatically. Now let's get into the way that you communicate that. And, I don't feel like that sentence goes really good there. Maybe you should try this. Just all that thing. And then,
So you're writing out the talk to begin with, right? And they're working through.
Yeah.
Was she in person with you training or on Zoom?
No, it was over Zoom.
Okay.
And I was going to say the biggest, all of that is the mechanics of it. But the biggest support for me personally was just the encouragement of, I don't feel good about this section, or I'm getting really nervous about this, or please give me some tips on, I feel like I've hit a wall with memorization. So it's all that kind of stuff that she has obviously experienced. So we got to be really good friends. And then she came in town, her and her husband, and we got to go out to dinner and spend time. And I still text with her back and forth about things. So
cool.
It was really good. It was that's super, super helpful. I couldn't have done it without that.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd heard that about. I think I've seen the TEDx coaches, or one or two of them, speak before, give some workshops, and if you don't know, or if you don't know about it, you don't realize it. But I heard that every single speaker gets a coach, and for a lot of the events, they work on it for months or a year, and because some of these, like I've seen you speak before, you're a good speaker. Some people that do the TED events are scared of the stage.
Oh yeah,
I've never spoken before,
and that was the case with many of
things.
the people that were there. there was one woman specifically who she was really, really nervous the day of, and almost like couldn't go out. She did a phenomenal job, but they did allow her to bring out like a stand with some notes. She was a little bit older, but she did a great job. But yeah, if you're an introvert, and then there was another, it was a great talk. It was a girl who was a cellist, and she actually played the cello with the harpist, and then talked about. It was probably the first time she had spoken in public that long about. She had started, I think, like Nashville Symphony something. She was a young woman, but beautifully played the cello, and then came out from behind it and gave her talk. So that was very big for her to do as well. So,
does TEDx or TED, do they have a training session that the average person can do for speaking, public speaking? Because I think they've kind of gotten this down. There's so much resources and experience with it. I think it'd be. I'm just curious if they had something online or something. Even
I'm not sure if they have something like that. I would be willing to bet they do. I know I bought a couple of different TEDx type books. I think one of them was from TED, but and then people who given it, because there's a certain style that they've kind of, I don't know if they've trademarked, but it's just obviously it's an 18 or a 12-minute talk, and there's certain things you can and can't talk about, and there's certain ways that you have to deliver it, and so it seems to be pretty effective.
Cool. Well, let's get into your talk a little bit more. Let's talk about your talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what you talked about.
Yeah, so when I was giving different options when applying, there was a couple of things that I threw out there, and the woman that was doing it said, that's good, and I didn't really hear back from her, and I honestly had about given up, because they have spots and you apply, and it's also they have a theme, and so what you submit has to kind of fit in wherever they have holes of wherever it is. And so I said, I have this other thing that I've been really thinking about and working on and studying. I'm going to throw it out there and submit it. And she loved it. And she's like, wow, this is really great. And so the content that I shared was, again, this concept of ambiguous loss to tragic optimism. And I would say in my life, and like all of our lives, I've been through different types of grief and loss. One of the things I mentioned in my talk is one of the first times that I can remember was when my oldest son left the home to go away to college. And the idea that, it was exciting, helping him get ready. I still had 2 kids at home. I knew that he wouldn't be far, that he'd be home, and I could text him all the time. But at that day he lost and left, and probably a week or 2 afterwards, there was a real sense of grief, like loss. And even though I knew all these things, there was just like the loss of presence and spirit in the house. So that was something to really process. Like, okay, what is this? Missing my son. Okay, yeah, we all go through that. But then other times in my life that I've talked about, where losing a business and depression and burnout and mental exhaustion and all these things that the loss of business relationships and friendships and now collectively the pandemic that we all feel the exhaustion, and now observing the war in the Ukraine, and we don't ever seem to get a break the last few years. But there's this phrase called ambiguous loss. There's a psychologist named Pauline Bosch. She coined it back in the 70s. She's still alive, as a matter of fact. But it's the concept of the feeling of stress and anxiety around either having a physical absence with a psychological presence, like when my son went away to school, or having a physical presence with a psychological absence, like if you're living with someone with a drug addiction or with Alzheimer's. It's it's the concept of continually having a connection with somebody or something that you can't really grasp or hold on to, but you're continually connected. So it's like having loss without any closure.
Right, like it just continues.
It just continues on.
So that's what ambiguous loss.
That's what ambiguous loss is. Just the feeling of like I feel blah all the time, or I can't get over this, or in a really sad situation, it would be another example would be like a couple who they have a miscarriage.
Is that concept is that more common than a total loss? What would be like, right? Because it seems like people hopefully don't get lost out of your life.
Yeah,
most super often, right? You don't have total losses that often, but this idea of an ambiguous loss where there's, I guess, a partial loss, right?
Yeah, they're very real losses.
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, of our life, how much of our losses you think are ambiguous?
I think a lot of them, and that's where I think the topic
you probably
was
don't see it as a loss.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And when I've shared this idea and this concept, which obviously I did not come up with, but it was very meaningful to me. But when I share it with people, just the term, I start to see their eyes go, oh. And more times than not, people can identify and go, that's really good words to something that I have felt or I know of or I'm going through. And so I think it's important to put those words to it and to realize that it is a normal thing. But to your point, I don't want people to get confused by the term ambiguous, because there's very real losses. Like people have lost people in the pandemic. We all have. There's been, there's real losses. So that's not the same thing. But there's also kind of something that you can't pinpoint and put your finger on, that maybe you didn't lose people. Maybe you don't have people that you personally know in wars in Ukraine. You don't know people. You didn't lose anybody in 9/11, but you felt that grief and you feel that loss and you feel the whatever it may produce in you for a long period of time.
And do you think that this concept has been extremely heightened because we see so much grief, we see so much loss that it's not specifically done to us, like you mentioned 9/11, but we feel it and we're seeing it from all different angles because of social media, maybe news or whatever else. Like we're taking on so much of that our bodies don't even realize that we are having that loss.
Absolutely. I think that's a big part of it. I think there's something very human and normal about it, but there's also the amplification of it today more than ever. And so what I wanted to try to explain in all that was that there's an individual reality of that most of us have gone through, but there's a collective element to it that we have, I think, is really important to acknowledge, that we go through, these losses together as human beings. And I think we don't, many times, these big things like a pandemic and war and things that are just that affect all of us. We have to acknowledge that and realize that it is human. So I talk about that, set the stage, and then I make this transition to this topic called Tragic Optimism, and now that's coined by a guy named Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
I know Viktor. I don't know him, but I've studied him a little bit.
I've got so many quotes from him written down everywhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he was a psychiatrist that went through the Holocaust, and he observed and lived, obviously, that experience. And then he wrote a book. He's written several books, but he's passed away. But he lived quite a life after that, and you can still watch videos of him actually on YouTube and other places. But he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and in that book, he mentions this term tragic optimism, and he says it's the search for meaning amidst the inevitable tragedies of human existence. And obviously, coming from where he came from, he believed, and he's spent his life work saying, we find meaning and purpose most often amidst things that we don't have control over. And so when we can't, you probably have this quote, says, when we find that we can no longer change our situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. That's his work and what he really talked about. That there, and I make the connection in the talk that there's this organic connection between ambiguous loss to tragic optimism, that you can't have one without the other, and that true meaning in life comes from these deep struggles and these hard times and these losses, and it's almost like a switch that goes off, that it gives you the opportunity to reinvent yourself, to re-engage, to rethink your life, and to really think hard about meaning and purpose. One of the things that Frankl observed in concentration camps, he said that the people who actually survived quite often were those who were able to find meaning and purpose in their life amidst something that looked like there would be no end. Meaning, it was the people who played the violin while starving, who loved their children, who, whatever it may be, they found meaning and purpose in life, versus, just giving up and saying life is meaningless, there's no hope, there's no future. And so being able to make those connections and realize that there will be loss, everybody will go through it, guaranteed. But that when you're in the midst of that, know that tragic optimism will come. It has to come. It always does. The opportunity is afforded to you to find meaning and purpose in the midst of that. And so, so one of the other things he said, and I tried to make a point of in the talk, that Frankl said, he said, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. And the point is, there's no shame in ambiguous loss. There's no, and I think we live in a society that we have to really walk that fine line, to not wallow in our loss and our pain and our negativity, but also don't go to the other extreme where there is a positivity that can be unhealthy, where you don't acknowledge it. Because I believe that the concept of tragic optimism is what really allows us to go deep and find meaning and purpose, which ultimately leads to happiness and joy. But you can't have one without the other. You can't immediately go to joy and happiness and purpose, I believe, without really acknowledging, okay, there's pain, there's struggle, there's hard times, and really engage in that, allow it to do its work to really lead you to tragic optimism. And I think the transformational life of a man like Viktor Frankl and so many others, we would not have without those horrendous things that he went through. And so, we're old enough to remember 9/11. And to me, that's a perfect example of how people spontaneously came together to help and to heal and to process this. And I would also say, too, amidst all the struggles of the pandemic, we have seen some really great things come out of it as a result. So people evaluating work-life balance, people evaluating the importance of mental health, apps that allow us to work more efficiently and connect, and mindfulness and meditation, and people just having a general overall attitude of, hey, I'm going to change the way I do things. We're going to, we use the word pivot all the time, but I'm going to pivot on my life and my work and my existence. And I think the Great Resignation is driven by a lot of those things. So we could go on and on. Volunteerism and donations are way up, more than they ever have. But again, that's the overall talk.
Yeah, that's there's a lot to chew on there, because there's other. This concept is also kind of explained in other places, and people would say that that's how you build character. Character is built out of
struggle,
challenges, struggle, and and you can't have one without the other, right? And then I've heard some people say, when you go through something, you don't want to be in it, obviously, but looking back, most people would say, I'm glad that happened, or I learned something from that.
It may take a while.
So
takes a while.
Did you give any personal examples of that?
I did. I talked about my son, but I also talked a little bit about, in 2017, it was a culmination of a 2-year downward spiral of failed business, mental exhaustion, all kinds of stuff. But that I came out of that, and through that, from what I know now to be the help and hope of Tragic Optimism, was I got to the point where I said, I can use this, I can learn, and I learned a ton from it. And it was a switch for me. It was an opportunity, a trigger to reinvent and reevaluate who I was, what I wanted to do with my life, where I wanted to go, what I wanted to be. And I can honestly say I'm very grateful for it. Now, I couldn't say it a year after, maybe even 2 years after, but now looking back, like Ken said, I think you do get to the point where you can say there's some really positive things about it, and never to call a bad thing good, but to say the growth and the transformation was again, it's organic. You can't have one without the other. So yeah, I've been through several, and I know that I will probably be through several. But we've got to acknowledge collectively that is the human experience, and we've been going through that collectively. Yeah. And I hope we don't have to continue to do this, but who knows what will or won't happen. So I think it's important to also see each other and other people in that light too.
Now, you mentioned, going through this together with people, but what can a person do you think, if they're going through it alone and they don't have that collective person that they can share those common experiences with?
Well, I think the first thing is to know, and this is, again, sounds cliche, but the purpose of my talk was to let people know that they're not alone, right? Yeah. Is, first of all, no, you are not alone. What you're going through, other people are going through, or they have been going through, and they made it through, and there was a way through. So you have to not ever give up on hope. And then the second thing I would say is find someone to talk to, whether it's a counselor, a therapist, a good friend. Just talk to another human being, and communicate, and don't isolate yourself. Isolation is the worst thing that you can do. Because you begin to get in your own head many times, and you can go that downward spiral that seems to be like there's no hope. Your brain and your body will tell you there's no hope. There's no hope. But there's something about being around other people, seeing that the world does go on, getting out in nature, whatever it may be, talking to someone that starts to remind you, maybe there is a way out, and maybe I will get through it, and even if I don't see it, I can find something, some meaning in the midst of it, like in it, while I'm in it. Like, even if it doesn't go away, even if I still feel crappy, even if whatever I'm dealing with, the problems still exist, I can still find some type of meaning and hope in the midst of it. And that's the thing that's hard to understand when you're in it, right? But history proves that tragic optimism will come, and it will present itself. And hopefully, like most people, you'll grab onto it and really make your way through.
Interesting. That's really good.
Yeah.
Thanks for going through that.
Sure.
So
sure.
is this was recorded, and is it available free to the public?
Yeah, it'll be on the TED main YouTube channel. I can't tell you when, unfortunately. I know that they take them all, they edit them, then they send them to TED, and then TED has to go through, approve them, and then post them.
Okay.
So it's a pretty tight organization, and I think that in a good way. They want to make sure people stay on topic, that there's no major issues, and they try to stay away from politics and religion, anything that's gonna be inflammatory. They want to try to keep the content something that is accessible by everybody and everyone, and keep it something that can be productive. So anyway,
well, I want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm also just want to let you know that I'm sure Ken and I are both. I'm very proud of you.
You can speak for me.
I'm going to speak for Ken right now. Ken is so proud of you. But
thank you, Brad.
Yeah,
thank you.
So
can you come with me everywhere?
That's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of guts too. So
I mean, to do all that, I'm curious, and some of the sort of tangential takeaways here of like, how long did it take for you to prep for this? Like, how long were you working on it?
My wife would tell you all the time.
Right, all the time.
I don't know if we have time to get into that, but the everybody has a different learning style, right? So what you, Ken, or Brad would do to prepare for something like that would probably be very different than me or each other. But for me, I had to get to the point where, I started with memorizing, every line. And then I realized this is not going to work for me, because the thought of, 4 pages of text and then trying to go, I forgot, what's the next sentence? I forgot what
literally scripted out.
That would throw me for a loop. So there's a concept called what's it called? A mental castle. Have you ever heard that?
Oh yeah, I've heard that. It's a fascinating thing, and I've heard a few podcasts on the subject.
So that's what I did.
People should look it up.
Yeah. So it's the concept of most of us memorize and learn things spatially and by location, by story versus text on a page. So for instance, for me, what I did is I broke up my talk into bullet points and like sections. And then I printed them out on a piece of paper, really large, that section, the bullet points for that section. And then I taped them to different items throughout the house. So, and opening was the entryway buffet there. Next one was the grandfather clock. The next one was the dinner table. And so I would then walk through the house practicing the speech with the bullet points, so that in my mind, when I stood up there, I know, okay, here's where I am now. Okay, now I'm walking down the hall. Now I'm walking into the kitchen. Now I'm on the refrigerator. Now I'm walking upstairs to the couch, or whatever it may be. And that's how I learned most of it. And then the day before, I went into a room, closed the door, and then taped each one of those all over the wall surrounding me, and I just stood in the middle of the room and kind of rotated and used them as I needed to. And my goal was to get those visual cues and memories in my brain, so that when I was up there talking, I could use those spatial to say, okay, now if I forgot a line, if I forgot a point, I knew what I was standing in front of. I knew what was there. And if I needed to go to the next thing, I could without getting all flubbed up. So that was the method I used.
Did you enlist I know your daughter's had some training, acting training.
Yeah, she helped.
I'm sure there's a lot of techniques in that world as well. So that's pretty interesting. I should try that sometime. Some of these techniques that you're talking about. It sounds right up my alley.
It's a little. I wanted to stretch myself. I wanted to grow. I wanted to do something I hadn't done, and so I'm glad I did. It was definitely stretching.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations, good job.
Yes, looking forward to.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for the text leading up to it. I felt your support, and that means a lot. So thank you.
No, it's awesome. I'm sure a lot of people would love to be doing something like that, and but getting the courage to actually do it, submit the talk, propose it, do all that kind of stuff, then
how long was the overall process, by the way, like from the time you submitted the idea to?
I was probably about a couple months, month and a half.
Okay. That's it. Huh?
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Hopefully people got something out of it. And when it releases, I guess we'll let you know and just keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we learned a lot of stuff from your talk. So thanks so much for breaking it down today.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Gentlemen. Well, until
next time.
What are you guys laughing?
You.
Oh, my little.
Your little burp.
Oh, that's what that was? Oh. I felt something, but I didn't really.
Yeah, that's good.
We're keeping it real here.
All right, we're going to expose everything in this show. I love it.
Yeah, everything. You don't get past.
Let's just all do the biggest belch we can.
See you guys later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.